welcome to the Rufus Project, your fortnightly podcast for tech news, game reviews, movie news, views and reviews, and people and events from the local area. I'm your host Trevor Holland. I'm also joined by my good friend and co-contributor Christian Fletcher, who you'll be hearing from a little later on in the podcast. So what do we have in store for you this fortnight? Well, if you listen to the last podcast, you'll know that I promised to be a little less serious with the tech news this week, and believe me, there's some very interesting stories coming your way there. We'll then have a look at Finn and Jake's Epic Quest, a game adaptation of the very popular Adventure Time TV series. And then we'll move on to our movie section, where Christian will have a look at Jackie Chan's classic movie Police Story and give us a bit of a rundown on the history of the Kung Fu movie. And then follow that with a movie review for Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Following a Marvel theme, we'll then have a look at the redeeming features of a largely forgotten movie based on a Marvel character. We'll travel back in time to the 30th anniversary screening of Ghostbusters on April 17, and we actually have a chat with a Ghostbuster. Christian has some very exciting and exclusive news for us. We start a new competition this fortnight as well, so keep listening for your chance to win. So sit back and enjoy the show for all the geeks out there. Not just the tech geeks, not just the game geeks, not just the movie geeks. Remember, if you have an interest or a passion for a particular subject, then you may indeed be a geek. And believe me, that is a good thing. Enjoy the show. Well, what an interesting and varied fortnight it's been in the techie geek news. Now, I did promise us the last episode that I would look at the lighter side, so I will not say anything about Game of Thrones setting even more records with regards to piracy, or the execs in Village Roadshow who are claiming that high ticket prices in Australia are caused by piracy and the fact that they actually have to pay their employees. Won't mention those at all, okay? I'll start with what is probably the biggest news of the week, and that is that this very podcast is listed on iTunes. Yep, you can fire up iTunes, search for the Rufus Project, and we're pretty much the top result. Oh yeah. In other news, which also relates to some stuff further on in the podcast, the Guardians of the Galaxy director has revealed that there is a tie-in with Avengers 3. Absolutely no one was surprised by this news. Dr. Frederick Newman, director of the Anxiety and Phobia Center at White Plains Hospital, has also come out making the suggestion that when you get an earworm, a song stuck in your head, the best option is to play the full song. Apparently this ties in with a common treatment for compulsive behavior. However, it is not an official scientific or medical discovery. Basically, Dr. Newman said, "When I get a tune stuck in my head, I play it out to the end. That works for me." Now, in news I thought I would never report about, the latest episode of My Little Pony comes with a quick and very clever reference to the very popular game BioShock Infinite. If you are a fan of this show or watch it with somebody else who is, and you look very closely in the background, you might just see a pair of twin ponies who have an object that any player of BioShock Infinite will recognize. Finally, I'm happy to advise that this podcast I can introduce the concept of the Awesome Geek of the Week. Now, if you have been listening, you know that if I come across someone who has done something particularly stupid, misguided, or just plain dumb, and it's made its way to the internet, then I've been declaring them the Clever Geek of the Week. The Awesome Geek of the Week is the other end of the scale. This really covers people who have done something very impressive off their own bat that also may just be a bit outside the box. A pastebin user, known as Databaser, has given himself or herself the monumental task of trying to compile a list of every video game ever made. Not just console games, not just PC games, but every mobile game, every browser game. Pretty much, if it's classified as a game, then this user wants it in the list. Doesn't matter what language it is, doesn't matter if it was internationally released or just some obscure and strangely terrifying Japanese erotic novel game. Again, it's going to be in this list. At last count, he was up to 43,806 games. Now that is a pretty massive effort, but there is still a long way to go. So if you want to help him out or just check out the list, have a search for Pastebin, list of every video game ever, and it should point you in the right direction. So, Databaser, for this monumental effort of archiving history, I hereby salute you as this week's Awesome Geek of the Week. Congratulations.
Huh? What the glug's going on?
Crud, dude. Did we get sucked inside BMO again?
It's time to take a look at Adventure Time, Finn and Jake's epic quest, based on the very popular animated series Adventure Time. Who'd have thought? Finn and Jake's epic quest sees our heroes in a rather strange situation. The land of Ooo has been transformed into a giant video game.
Look, the entire land of Ooo has been turned into a video game.
Awesome!
Oh yeah! Ka-ching!
And BMO has been kidnapped. It's up to Finn and Jake to find out what's happened and to save the kingdom. So what can you expect from Finn and Jake's epic quest? When I started playing, it felt very, very familiar. Initially, it has a very Legend of Zelda feel, with the way that the characters combat the bad guys, and the way that, I suppose, the gameplay proceeds. It didn't take very long for this sensation to pass, though, because when I started collecting manuscripts that had mystery spells that you could only find out by using them, and the way that the layout of the world itself was of floating islands which you move through progressively, the game started to feel a lot more like the classic Toe Jam and Earl from the old Sega Mega Drive games. Now hang on, if you haven't played Toe Jam and Earl, that's definitely one worth having a look at, by the way. So a game like Toe Jam and Earl with combat remarkably similar to Zelda. Wow, I guess that sounds like a pretty good combination, hey?
Yeah!
Well, let's just say this game proves that something doesn't always add up to the sum of its parts. As you progress through the levels, you find out very soon that combat is repetitive and the enemies don't really have a lot of variety in them. You can change between the two characters for different attack styles, and as you level up your characters, you do get new attacks and combos. But once you settle on a particular combo that does best damage, and realize that most enemies actually telegraph their attacks either by exclamation marks above their heads or by other visual clues, then you soon realize that most enemies are pretty much just busy work as you explore these areas. In order to proceed to the next little levels, you need to find magical artifacts, and the game itself is actually quite handy in letting you know if there's one on the level. What this means is that most levels are just a hunt for the exit, with actual exploration reserved for those levels that have an artifact for you to find. Again, I've got to compare this to Toe Jam and Earl, where you had to find parts of your spaceship, and the game very helpfully told you whether one of those were present on the level you are on. To increase the challenge and mix things up though, there are tougher enemies who generally have a particular weak spot where you need to attack. This is another area where the game falls down a bit. Given the erratic movement of these enemies, as well as just how difficult it can be to place yourself in the right place at times, battling these enemies can be quite frustrating. Look, if you get the combo off at the right time, in the right place, you'll make pretty short work of them. But the fact that when you're halfway through a combo and they decide to attack, you can't always dodge in time. And this can lead to some very frustrating situations where just failing to be able to get in the right place or starting your attack just as the enemy moves in the wrong way at the wrong time, well, it just really takes away from the game. This is exacerbated when you come across the boss levels. The bosses themselves have some pretty major attacks and are usually backed up by a number of the tougher enemies as well. Most of the bosses also have the ability to get a cheap shot into you or even move away from you at convenient times, and this really stretches out battles that feel more like chores than actual fun. Trust me, the frustration factor on most of these boss battles is pretty high. If you do die though, it's not game over. You simply respawn a short way away and get to do it all over again. This adds an extra layer of frustration to the boss battles because when this occurs, the bosses actually regenerate a portion of health, which is just another cheap method of extending out these particular battles. There are some treats for fans of the show. The characters are voiced by the actual actors, and certainly it has that Adventure Time feel. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the show, but I have seen it, and definitely, it's pure Adventure Time.
Hello, my love.
Unfortunately, given the repetitive nature of the combat and the sheer frustration caused by bigger enemies and bosses, I think even the most ardent fans of the show are going to have problems seeing this particular game through. And before anyone says, hey, hang on, this one's marketed for kids, well, I think even kids who are fans of the show aren't going to bother seeing this through beyond a couple of levels. So Adventure Time? Finn and Jake's epic quest? Well,
Finn and Jake's epic quest! Start playing already!
I can't really recommend it.
With my upcoming screening of the 1985 cult classic Qd Ghostbusters, aka Police Story, starring and directed by Jackie Chan, I thought it was time to have a little bit of a look at the genre and some of the people that have made it iconic and what it is today. As a lot of our listeners may know, on the first Wednesday of every month at a venue called Room 60, which is in Kelvin Grove Urban Village, I run cult movie nights which start at 6:30pm, and they range from the weird, the wonderful, the offbeat, the classic, the trashy, the movies that probably should still be rotting on VHS. Our next screening on May 7th will be looking at an 80s martial arts or kung fu cult classic Police Story from 1985, starring and directed by Jackie Chan. We really need to look back at the early 70s. At this stage, independent studios such as a company called Golden Harvest, it saw a boom in independent martial arts films, which broke away from the traditional Hong Kong cinema that had existed prior to this time. Now, to define a martial arts film, it usually contains many characters who are martial artists, of course, only usually having minimal plot and minimal character development, because the whole point of these movies really is to focus on the action. The 1970s saw a kung fu wave of which Bruce Lee was the leading figure. After starting out in the role of Kato in the TV show Green Hornet, Bruce Lee had a martial arts breakthrough with the movie Fists of Fury and the sequel Fist of Fury in the early 70s. It wasn't until 1973 did Enter the Dragon take the genre of the martial arts movie to the mainstream. It was a critical and commercial success.
What do you know about Han? He lives like a king on that island. Totally self-sufficient. I gather you still don't have enough to bust up his operation. We know everything. We can prove nothing.
Funnily enough, it also starred John Saxon, the American, who was pretty much cast in every second cult movie in existence. Enter the Dragon was Bruce Lee's most famous movie, and unfortunately was his last film. He did die in July 1973. It would have been interesting to see where his career would have taken him after the success of the film. By the late 70s, other martial artists, such as Jackie Chan, was introducing comedy to the kung fu genre. This helped give the film a bit more of a spark and continued it into the 80s, so it really helped him become a star. By the 80s, he and many of his colleagues would forge sort of a slicker type of Hong Kong pop cinema, and this was almost more spectacular, and it was really to compete with what Star Wars had started, the summer blockbuster. We move now to 1985 with Qd Ghostbusters, I don't know if my pronunciation is very good, aka Police Story from 1985. It is one of the key martial arts movies of the 80s, so it's really exciting to be screening it on May 7th at Room 60. Starring and directed by Jackie Chan, it was the first of 6, believe it or not, Police Story films, which starred Jackie Chan as a Hong Kong police detective named Kevin. Police Story took the budget and the stunts of the Hong Kong cinema to a whole new level. In many ways, with this film and the subsequent Police Story sequels, Jackie Chan created the template for what many contemporary martial arts movies are now following. The whole idea of action and comedy, combining cops, kung fu, and, modern cities with glass, metal, speeding vehicles, all that sort of stuff. It's funny seeing the comedy that Jackie Chan did instill into the genre in the late 70s, and it's still there today, and it's pretty much essential to the modern martial arts movie. And it's really interesting that with DreamWorks movie Kung Fu Panda, that it successfully brought the genre over into animation.
Go ahead, Panda. Show us what you can do.
Okay. Yeah, I just ate, so I'm still digesting, so my Kung Fu might not be as good as later on.
It's good to see Jackie Chan still out there doing his thing in modern cinema. It's going to be great to revisit Jing Chat Goosey, aka Police Story, on May 7th at Room 60. For more details, visit room60.com.au, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Most of the intelligence community doesn't believe he exists. The ones that do call him the Winter Soldier.
Captain America and the Winter Soldier is the latest epic from our good friends at Marvel Studios. Following on from the Avengers, and of course the first Captain America movie, here we see Captain America himself, Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans, having to come to terms with the new world, a much more complicated world that he was used to before he got frozen.
To build a better world sometimes means tearing the old one down.
This is made more complicated when Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, lets slip a few secrets which really don't sit very well with our good friend the Captain. Before too long, some shenanigans cause a bit of concern for our good friend Nick Fury, and Captain America, along with Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, played by Scarlett Johansson, find themselves on the run from the organization they thought they could trust.
How do we know the good guys from the bad guys? If they're shooting at you, they're bad.
That's right, they become fugitives from Shield, the clandestine organization which basically has been organizing the Avengers. Along the way, they team up with Sam Wilson, who introduces us to a new character for the movies. However, I'm sure that any of the comic book fans will recognize the Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie, and together they need to try to work out what's happened to S.H.I.E.L.D., why everything has gone so bad, and just who the Winter Soldier is. I won't say who plays the Winter Soldier, because that probably would then be a bit of a spoiler for the movie itself. So what does Captain America the Winter Soldier offer? Interestingly, at its heart, this superhero spectacular, this movie almost seems to be trying to be a gritty espionage thriller rather than another superhero movie. Much of the focus is on Captain America and Black Widow trying to work out what's going on. This is interspersed with many combat sequences, which seem to borrow very heavily from the Jason Bourne movies. The fight scene in the elevator, which is teased at in the trailer, is an excellent example of what I mean. It doesn't completely lose its superhero flavour though. There are also plenty of scenes where superhuman people are performing superhuman feats in superhuman circumstances.
He's fast, strong, had a metal arm.
Another interesting aspect of the movie is in the way that some of the characters are almost a shadow or a reflection of what is actually happening in the movie. Probably the prime example would be Black Widow herself. We're in a movie where the main characters don't know if they can completely trust the organization, which they believe are the good guys, and they don't know what to believe, what is secret, what is truth, and what are lies. Combine this with Black Widow herself being a very mysterious character, and there is a sequence where Steve Rogers is trying to find out just who Black Widow is, and all he gets back are vague answers and definitely nothing that resembles the truth. Which does lead us to, I guess, some of the niggling issues with this movie. The relationship between Captain America and Black Widow is a troubling one. Here is a guy from a much more innocent time, completely out of his depth, who simply does not agree with the actions and with the decisions being made by his bosses. And even though he does not know who to trust, somehow he decides that this other character who does not give him anything resembling the truth is the one that he can trust. It really doesn't make sense in the early movie.
You told me not to trust anyone.
Saying that though, these two do work very well together and make a very effective team when everything inevitably goes to hell. The introduction of the Falcon is also a bit dubious. We meet this character who just seems like an everyday guy back from war trying to rebuild his life. Just coincidentally, he happens to be the pilot of a super secret device, which, once put on his back, turns him into the Falcon.
When do we start? We just did.
The movie itself also occasionally has issues with the fact that it's kind of trying to be two things at the same time. It's trying to keep the tension as a gritty espionage thriller, however, with the more fantastical aspects brought on by the fact that it is still a superhero movie, it really does occasionally have trouble in trying to keep a consistent tone. This, of course, is more than made up for by the sheer amount of fun that can be had with this movie. At the end of the day, the performances are fantastic. Everyone is doing a great job, and we do get to see a bit more of the mysterious Nick Fury. The Winter Soldier himself is suitably menacing and mysterious, and works as a perfect counterpart to the seemingly unstoppable Captain America. Now, a quick word of warning. For those of you who are following the TV show Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you may have heard that the more recent episodes do have a crossover with the Captain America movie. Now, I made the mistake of watching episode 17 before seeing this movie. I knew there was a crossover, but I was not expecting the extent of the spoiler in that particular episode. So if you are someone who does not want too much revealed, then if you are watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., stop at episode 16. Do not go beyond episode 16 until you've seen Captain America the Winter Soldier. Okay? You have been warned.
The price of freedom is high. And it's a price I'm willing to pay.
Speaking of plot points, well, not so much spoilers, more teasers. Of course, as with the previous Marvel movies, you can't leave your seat when the credits start rolling. There are actually two scenes within the final credits. A mid-credit scene which introduces another two characters who, again, if you follow the comic books, will probably make you wish that other Marvel properties weren't tied up in rights issues. They've had to give a couple of characters a new origin story, but let's just say we do have an X-Men crossover. They're just X-Men that aren't tied up with the actual rights of the X-Men's movies. And right at the end, there is another stinger which relates more to the events of the movie you've just watched, but, well, obviously I can't say anything about that. Just safe to say, if you see this movie, sit through to the very, very end. And you should definitely see this movie.
Looks like you're giving the orders now, Captain.
Damn right.
With the success of Captain America the Winter Soldier at the box office, the Marvel movies are riding high, which I guess does make it a good time for them to take a risk with Guardians of the Galaxy and a very strange character known as Rocket Raccoon. However, there is the forgotten Animal Marvel hero, and he has had his own movie. So I thought this episode's redeeming features would have to be about Howard the Duck. Made back in 1986 by George Lucas, showing some of the form we wouldn't be seeing again till The Phantom Menace, Howard the Duck was really one of the early attempts to bring an obscure comic book character to the big screen. Panned by critics and a massive flop at the box office at a time before the movie companies could blame piracy, it can be argued that Howard the Duck may well have put the comic book movie back by a number of years with its poor performance. But hey, I'm not here to review it. I'm here to let you know if this movie, which garners such IMDb comments as "it's so bad, it's bad," actually has any redeeming features. So here we go. The opening on Howard the Duck's homeworld sets a very disturbing picture of where he comes from. Movie posters inspired by popular movies at the time have a rather sleazy aspect to them, and there's no other way to put this. There is some very disturbing female duck nudity. You're not going to see that anywhere else.
Let the female creature go!
Throughout the movie, you can't help but notice the fact that Howard the Duck's head actually changed sizes. This is because the character of Howard himself was portrayed using an animatronic puppet in some scenes and by actual actors in suits in other scenes. It gets to the point where it's almost hypnotic. It's very strange.
That's it. No more Mr. Nice Duck.
The reactions from the humans in this movie to the strange duck-like creature ranges from absolutely horrified to strangely indifferent. It is really hard to try to work out the reason for this inconsistency, but it certainly makes for an interesting watch.
That's a duck, man!
Here, you have a chance to see a movie that Tim Robbins probably leaves off his resume. Yes, that was Tim Robbins. You get to see the famous actor Jeffrey Jones playing a very Ed Rooney-like scientist. In fact, at one point of the movie, he is displaying a number of injuries, and it's almost like they just said, "Hey, leave your makeup on there from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, come over, change your suit, let us make your face a bit redder, and you're perfect to go."
Listen to me, small visitor. I can explain how you got here.
It's almost like Principal Ed Rooney is actually moonlighting as a particle physicist. As an added bonus, you do later get to see Ed Rooney possessed by a demonic alien. And finally, there is that typical 80s rock closing theme song. It is spectacularly bad. And interestingly enough, was actually written by Thomas Dolby, who I believe should probably face charges for crimes against music, since he was responsible for a number of the musical pieces within this movie. I have no idea what Leah Thompson just sung there. So do you think these redeeming features will get you to watch this terrible, terrible film? Let me know. And finally, really, why did they need to go for Rocket Raccoon when Howard the Duck is already the established Marvel bizarre animal hybrid hero? I don't know. I don't know.
Every duck's got his limit, and you scum have pushed me over the line.
Local wildlife. Last Thursday, the 17th of April, saw a plethora of people descend on the Chanel Cinema at St. Lucia in Brisbane to view the 30th anniversary screening of Ghostbusters. That alone would have made it a very special night, but fortunately, the Queensland Ghostbusters franchise also made an appearance to give the night a bit more character and a bit more fun. I was lucky enough to be able to speak to the man behind the Queensland Ghostbusters franchise. I must warn you, we were in a fire full of pretty excited and happy people, so there is quite a bit of background noise in this interview. And here is what he had to say.
Who you gonna call?
Alright, so I'm here with Matt from the Queensland Ghostbusters franchise.
Hey, g'day, how you doing?
Thanks, good, thanks for talking to the Rufus project.
That's alright.
So, I'm just curious, how did the Queensland Ghostbusters franchise come together?
It's actually kind of funny. The Ghostbuster was the second costume I ever did, and when I got it, I wanted to film this skit video at South Bank. I just wanted to get crowd reactions and stuff, so I filmed this video just of a person wearing a sheet running through South Bank, and us chasing after them as Ghostbusters just to get crowd reactions and stuff. Around the same time, like the Ghostbuster isn't the only costume I do, I became famous online for my Death Trooper, which is a zombie stormtrooper. I'm like the number one search result on Google if you search for zombie stormtrooper. And so this guy named Alex, he saw my zombie stormtrooper, he tracked me down on Facebook, and he just contacted me like in regards to the zombie stormtrooper. Then he saw my skit video, and he's like, "Oh my god, Ghostbusters, that's the coolest thing ever." Is this too noisy? No, that's cool. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and he just thought Ghostbusters is really great, so he wanted to put his costume together as well. And then after he put his costume together, we had lots of mutual friends all trying to put the costume together as well. And so we figured we'd have to create a group for all these costumers that are coming in to have one centralised place for us to do stuff.
Nice. So what was your first experience with Ghostbusters, the movie?
I was actually 4 when it was released, and I was lucky enough to live like just across the road from a drive-in theatre. So I remember I used to go with my older brother Stephen, and we'd actually sneak to the fence and we'd watch the movie through the fence with no sound at all. It looked really, really cool. So I didn't actually get to see it with sound. A couple of years later, one of my friends came to school with a VHS copy of the tape and used to lend it around. So yeah, when I was 6 or 7, that was the first time I ever actually got to see the movie with sound and fell in love with it straight away. So
fantastic. Well, as we know, tonight's the 30th anniversary of the movie. Why do you think it is still so popular 30 years on?
Ghostbusters is one of those strange things. Firstly, it's a cult favourite, so, people grew up with it, and with a lot of things, when people grow up with it, they see it through rose-coloured glasses, and it still remains wonderful. But the interesting thing is, if you take someone who's never seen Ghostbusters and you make them watch it today, they still really enjoy it, and I think that's due to like the quality of the writing and the cast. When you've got people like Bill Murray and all the others in there, they're just a powerhouse of comedy, and it's just such a wonderfully made and wonderfully comedic movie.
Nice. Now, I know when I first contacted you, you were a bit worried because you were doing some charity stuff as well. What can you tell us about the charity work that you do?
Well, Ghostbusters isn't the only costume group I'm involved with. I'm actually involved with a group called Born to Life, and we focus on superheroes and stuff like that. So I do a lot of charity work through them. With the Ghostbusters, we work with the Melanoma Awareness Foundation for the Mad March. I was actually really nervous. That was one of the first events I ever did in my costume, and I was really nervous how it would go down because you're dealing with cancers. It's a touchy subject, and you're a Ghostbuster. I didn't want to offend anyone or anything like that. But we were so popular on the day that we've essentially been asked to come back every year and have a table and be an official part of the event. So that's one of our major charity things. We've also done our Starlight Weeks and things like that as well.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So, going on to the more Ghostbuster side of it, so have you encountered or trapped any spooks, spectres or ghosts around Brisbane?
Funnily enough, I also run Brisbane Amateur Paranormal Investigators, which is a real paranormal investigation company. So, yes, I have. The interesting thing is people kind of get the two things mixed up. When I rock up to do a paranormal investigation, they expect me to rock up in this and have the pack going and the music and everything like that. And sometimes when I do events like this, people think it's legit as well. Of course, I play that up completely tonight. If anyone's asking, are you a real Ghostbuster? Of course I'm a real Ghostbuster. I have a, PhD in parapsychology and whatever else I can think of at the top of my head. So, yes.
Nice. Well, speaking of Ghostbusters, and let's paraphrase the movie a bit. How is Harold Ramis, and have you seen him lately?
Old Harold, he's not returning any of my contact at the moment. I think it's the Buddhism thing. I think he's busy pursuing his, higher life set, and so he just doesn't have time to come back and haunt us anymore, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, I'm missing too.
Yeah.
And to wrap it up, who are you going to call it?
If it was me, I'd call He-Man.
Excellent.
Yeah. He-Man. That's it.
Nice. Ghostbusters 2 reference. Well, thanks so much for talking to us, and I'll let you get back to getting ready and we can get the show going.
No worries. Hope you enjoy the movie. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Hey, anybody see a ghost?
Rufus Project listeners, you heard it here first. The New Globe Theatre at 220 Brunswick Street, Fortitude Valley is reopening its cinema with me as the cinema guy. We're really excited to launch on May 20th with a B-grade double of 50s films, Teenagers from Outer Space and Catwomen of the Moon. Of course, what a better way to open in this underground cult cinema that has such a rich history in Brisbane for offering an alternative art house experience. I have quite a rich history with the venue when it used to be the Globe Theatre. In 2005 it launched as a live music and cult cinema venue. In 2006 I came on board and for almost 5 years ran some very successful cult movie nights and programs. And the Globe is very much responsible for the person I am today, that learning about audiences, learning what movies people like to go to. And it was great to be able to support an independent venture like this. So the Globe has come back as the New Globe Theatre, but it still has the same fantastic vibe it had before.
we have some new competitions for you this time around. It appears that nobody really wants the classic indie game pack, which is unfortunate, but hey, we're still finding our feet. So this time it's all about the entertainment. First up, we have 2 copies of the acclaimed BBC series Small Island to give away. Small Island is about the lives and loves of Jamaicans and Londoners involved in the Second World War and is based on an award-winning novel by Andrea Levy. It stars Naomi Harris, Hugh Quashie, and everyone's favourite Sherlock, back before he was Sherlock, Benedict Cumberbatch. So if you'd like to get your hands on one of 2 copies of this acclaimed BBC series on DVD, now it is a Region 4 Australian DVD, just so you know, all you need to do is leave the comment Island in the comments. So did you like the feature on police story and kung fu movies? Well, Christian is very graciously giving away a double pass to the screening of Police Story at Room 60 on May 7. So for your chance to win, simply leave the comment Police Story down below. Now this can be on any of our contact areas, whether you follow the Rufus Project on Twitter, Facebook, listen to us on Podomatic, or even leave a comment on iTunes. And those are all the options available to you. So come on, enter those competitions, and best of luck. Thanks for listening to the Rufus Project. We've had a lot of fun putting this one together, and we really look forward to talking to you again next fortnight. As always, we'd love to hear what you thought of the podcast. If you have any suggestions for improvement or any requests for features, we're more than happy to hear them. Also, if you have an event or if you're someone who you think we might like to feature on a future podcast, definitely get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Again, you can leave comment or feedback via Twitter or Facebook via the Rufus Project. Leave a comment on the Podomatic page, or hey, you can even review us on iTunes now. And, we hope that you'll be nice to us. Don't forget, we also have the Rufus Project YouTube channel, where we post playlists of the trailers or videos that relate to the stuff that we've talked about in this podcast. You'll also find a YouTube version of the podcast itself, but if you are listening via that method, I guess you already know about that. I'm afraid I still don't have that witty sign out, so feel free to add your own. See you next time.